All right. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol na'eh b'dbarei.
Amen.
Chaim, everyone. Chaim. Oh, goes down just like water. Okay. Just going to mute everybody. And when you want to talk, feel free to unmute. So we had a fabringen of shluchim last night here, downstairs. And I left early at 2:30 in the morning, and they were still going on. I just told them, please close the door behind you. Huh? Chai Elul tonight. The life of Elul. The day that the Baal Shem Tov was born in 1698, the day that the Alter Rebbe, founder of Chabad, is born in 1745. Auspicious time. We're a week before. Next week, there will not be a Torah studies class in the evening because we're all going to be by the finishing of the Torah, of the 9th Torah. And whoever hasn't signed up yet, here in Montreal, and if you're not in Montreal, you can always fly in. Make sure you sign up for this great event. That will be the 9th Torah that has 304,805 letters, each letter representing another Jewish neshama, and uniting all of the Jews. So that with the 9th, it's about 3 million people that it represents and uniting them. So we'll be completing here in Montreal. Montreal has been chosen the spot to celebrate. And so we're all going to, everybody that's here is going to be there next Sunday night, right? Some of you I know already signed up. And for those that didn't, please do.
Will it be live on Facebook?
And if you're the other side of the world, you'll be able to watch it on Chabad.org. Okay, so at the Fabringen, so I when Hasidim Fabring, so you know it's soul talk. You can be honest, and you can you can express what your thoughts are, what your feelings are, and you hope that the other person's not going to get offended. And if they get offended, then one of two things: the ones who's offended needs to look inside and how do you get offended? And the other one, who perhaps maybe was too strong or whatever. We live in a world today that everything has to be sugar-coated, right? And therefore, the sentiment is all you need is love.
Isn't it
right?
An expression more it's in Anya, love conquers all.
Love calling, right?
Sorry.
So the question, is that the case? How do we understand that? How do we understand that in terms of, in Judaism, accepting God's authority, right? Today we live in a world where authority is a four-letter word. There might be a few more extra letters there, but but in spirit, it's a four-letter word that shouldn't be pronounced. And who are you to be an authority, right? What, because you're my mother or father? Like the sentiment has come to. And everything has to be loving. So if you say something, was a couple of instances last night. Things were said a little strong, and sometimes people are uncomfortable and don't like that, and especially if it's said in an authoritative manner. So that's why we all want to go back to all you need is love, and love will conquer all, because, that's a good feeling. But yet in Judaism, we do have a concept of submission, subordinate to God's authority. And that's a building block that defines Jewish life and the fulfillment of Torah and mitzvahs, right? We see that in the Shema. There's 3 paragraphs in the Shema. In the first paragraph, why does it come first? So the Mishnah explains, because in the first paragraph of the Shema, actually, let's get this up over here. Moment. Oh, look at that. It works. There we go. So in the first paragraph of the Shema, it says in the Talmud, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korach said, why, when reciting the Shema, does the portion of Shema precede V'hayim Shemaya, the second portion? The reason is so that one first accepts upon themselves the authority of the kingdom of heaven, and only then accepts upon them the authority of mitzvahs, which appear in the paragraph of V'hayim Shemaya. So first you need God's authority that you accept, and then you can follow his commandments, right? So we could put that into different terminology. First, you need what we call the fear of heaven, that God is in control of everything. And that is the beginning, as the Alter Rebbe in Tanya expresses in chapter 41. It says, one must constantly bear in mind the first step of the religious service is what lies at its very core. Now, conventionally, fear is a primary driver behind abstaining from prohibited behaviors, whereas love is a primary driver motivating positive behavior. However, love alone is really not enough to drive good behavior. Rather, at the very least, it's critical to draw upon the natural fear every Jew has deep in the heart, not to rebel against God. Work must be done to bring this natural fear into full expression in the heart or mind. Jews must accept upon themselves God's authority and sovereignty so that they serve him in every way. Okay. So we have a mitzvah in this week's Torah portion. It's a double Torah portion, the Yak of Nitzavim and Yayeilich, and speaking about God's authority. And it's actually the mitzvah of Hakel. We're coming to the end of a year of Hakel. The Hakel means gathering, right? And when was this said, this particular mitzvah? On the very day that Moshe Rabbeinu is going to pass on. Actually, he gives us 2 mitzvahs, the 2 final mitzvahs in the Torah. Second last is Hakel, and the last mitzvah is to write a Torah. And today that means everybody having a letter in the Torah. So what happened? Every 7 years after the sabbatical year was a year of Hakel, that every Jew, man, woman, and child, had to make a pilgrimage to the Holy Temple to celebrate there. The king, he would select certain passages of the Torah from the book of Ela Devarim, from Deuteronomy, and the purpose of this gathering, the Torah tells us. In this week's Torah portion. Then Moses commanded them, saying, at the end of every 7 years, at the appointed time, during the festival of Sukkot, after the year of release, which the year, or at least means the Shemitah year, the sabbatical year, when all Israel comes to appear before God in the place he will choose. Why in the place he will choose, not Jerusalem? Because that choice was not made known until about 800 years later to King David, right? 1 second, no, not 800 years, sorry. 500 years later to King David. So in that place that he will choose, that you should read it, this Torah before all of Israel in their ears. Assemble the men, the people rather, the men, the women, and the children, and your stranger in your cities, and in order that they hear, and in order that they learn and fear God, and they will observe to do all the words of this Torah. And their children who did not know will hear and learn to fear God all the days that you live on the land that you are crossing the Jordan to possess. So what is the point over here? In order that you learn to fear God. So this is a massive assembly once in 7 years that never happens otherwise. Because when you come for Jewish holidays, men have the obligation to go to Jerusalem. The women don't have an obligation. The children don't have an obligation, right? They can't go, but they don't have an obligation. It's only once in 7 years that everybody has an obligation. Very unique. Could you imagine the mass of people that were there? And what's the whole point? To instill fear. Learn to fear God. Which brings us to the question. This is the greatest gathering of the Jewish people that occurs only once in 7 years. It shouldn't be too often. It becomes, monotonous, once a year type of thing. It might be. And what it is? Not to love God. Not to bring a neighborly love to, all the people that are going there together, but to fear God. Why? Wouldn't it make more sense to bring the people together and instill a love for God? Wouldn't that be a greater motivation or a greater reinforcement of their commitment if it was the love of God? Good question, no? Alan?
Well, I come to God because I love to be with God. I come the love, the essence of God. But on the other hand, I do see that fearing God, the other side of the coin is the fact that if we go astray, there is consequences too.
Yeah, but you're talking about gathering the people.
But I find it hard to gathering people for fear.
For fear, right.
It's hard for me to envision.
That's the question.
Well, maybe it starts with fear, then goes to love.
Well, but the verse doesn't say that, though, right? If the verse would say, if it would say both things, so you'd say, it says fear and then says love, okay, that would make sense. But the verse doesn't say that. Why not? Right. So the Alter Rebbe, sorry?
That's why I'm here tonight.
So the Alter Rebbe says, the person doesn't feel uplifted whatsoever. How will he ever be able to step up to the plate in their religious life? They'll give up saying, who am I? And what can I accomplish? So the fear of heaven doesn't seem to be the way that's going to make me feel that I am here, to accomplish. It may get me in the moment to follow the dictate, but how long of a stretch will it be? For the next 7 years? In other words, it's like when you were a kid, if you remember, your parents took you somewhere public, right? And you kind of acted out. I mean, none of you here, but you acted out, and your parents scolded you, right? So you do this, wait till we get home, or whatever that, wait till your dad gets home, right? Right. Now, what did that do? It got you to behave maybe in that moment, Sometimes it works. In that moment, we behaved. But it's not long lasting. Seemingly, if you got someone to have a feeling of love towards whatever your mother told you to do, she wouldn't have to say, wait till your father gets home, right? To instill that fear in you. Okay, so there must be some kind of deeper meaning here that we need to unravel. But before we get there, let's go more into this mitzvah of Hakel. As mentioned, next Sunday we won't have a class because we're going to have a huge Hakel gathering of hundreds and hundreds of people that will be here locally, joining in the year of Hakel. The Rebbe made from a one gathering in times of the Holy Temple, and the Rebbe made it into a year of gathering. It's a year of gathering. So, as we said, the verse, what does it say? To bring you to fear Hashem. That's the purpose of the gathering, right? To come to fear God. Let's understand what that means. So the Rambam writes something very interesting. He says that the reason for the gathering, or sort of, I don't know if the backdrop, if you will, is that what we should do is to bring us back to something that we experienced once in our collective lifetime. And what is that? What did we experience? Huh? No, that's true, but not that. That wasn't the collective whole. Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, right? This week's Torah portion, today's reading, the souls that were there and the souls that were not there, because we were all there, right? Some physically and some just in soul, right? So that was a one-time experience. And the Rambam says that what we're trying to do with Hakel is to relive that experience, not just to make, when we study Torah, we come to a mental awareness, we come to a understanding with our minds, the importance of a mitzvah, the importance of the Parshah, whatever we're learning in Torah, the value and the importance of it, right? Then we might even have a feeling towards it. So when you feel the importance of Hakel, so then, you're going to come to the Hakel gathering. But there's one thing missing: experience. How do you experience something? So what Hakel is to try to recreate, so to speak, right? To have some semblance of it is Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah. Imagine you're there once again at Matan Torah, receiving. And this is what the Rambam explains. Let's look at text number 5. Our Rambam says it is a positive commandment to gather together the entire Jewish people, men, women, and children, after every sabbatical year, when they ascend for the pilgrimage holiday of Sukkot. The king reads passages from the Torah there that encourage them to perform mitzvahs and strengthen them in the true faith. Scripture established Hakel exclusively for the purpose of strengthening true faith. A person should see themselves as if they were just now commanded regarding the Torah and heard it from God. For the king is an agent to deliver the God's words. Wow. In other words, it needs to be visceral. That we are there experiencing what our soul experienced at Mount Sinai, right? And once we experience it, what will that do? Take something that's an abstract idea called faith and make it more real for us. We live it rather than we just sense it. That is its point. That's what it's meant to replicate. That's what Rabbi explains in this week's Sikha. Rabbi says the sea exchange that occurred at Sinai is not so much that the Jews learned Torah or heard the mitzvahs from God. After all, those things happened before Sinai with the patriarchs as well. They also learned Torah, right? They also heard about the mitzvahs from God, right? Rather, the major change was that then the Jews were able to actually see it, as stated in many verses. As is well known, seeing something is incomparable to hearing about it. Hearing is from a distance, which is why abstract things can only be heard through cognitive processes, but not seen. Visuals, by definitions, are close up, which is why only tangible items can be seen and why seeing something makes it so real. This is what happened at Sinai when the nation saw the thunder, right? You don't see thunder, you hear thunder, right? They saw thunder, right? In other words, it was visceral. It was an experience. As our sages say, they saw what is usually only heard. In other words, the notion that I am your God became as real and true as something that can be physically seen. It's not that they physically saw God. You know, like I'm seeing the cup now. Oh, I see God. No. As I see the cup, that it's so real and I'm holding it and there's no doubt about it. Their experience of God speaking was no doubt about it, as I'm seeing the cup that I'm holding. Okay. Did you ever see a YouTube video and you liked it so much, and what do you hit? Replay, right? Sometimes then you hit replay a year later. Oh, look what I found. So we hit a replay once every 7 years.
They say that most of our learning comes from visualization.
Right.
Process
right. So this is what the Rambam is saying, strengthening the true religion every 7 years. We got to recharge our batteries, the entire nation. Unique, the entire nation, men, women, and children. They have to hear the king's voice to be inspired, to be strengthened in our spiritual lives. As the Rabbi further explains in the Sikha, how would the people for all time after the events at Sinai be able to experience a feeling of seeing God? Simply memorializing the events at Sinai wouldn't be enough, for a memory is from the past. When a person stands at a distance, there must be a special event, which is what Hakel was. Every Jew, man, women, and child, gathered together as they did at Sinai and envisioned themselves as if they were now directly hearing the word of God for the king's delivery. So if you notice in the words, what was the words? The Torah tells us to fear God, right? And Rambam spoke about fearing God. But what does he say further? To be inspired. So here's the question. Isn't love more inspiring than fear? You don't usually feel inspired through when you say the word fear. It might be the motivator, like you said, when your mother said, wait till your father gets home. So it might be a motivator in the moment, but it's hardly an inspiration. It's a motivator because you're afraid of the consequence, but it's hardly an inspiration. But the Rambam says clearly it's an inspiration that we should strengthen our faith. How do we understand that? So our question actually becomes even stronger now as a result. Let's go into the next point. And that is another paradox about Hakel. It's about the king. The king would read from the Torah scroll, right? He was the vehicle of God's words brought to the people that would evoke the fear that would bring about the inspiration, right? The king himself embodies both of these elements. On the one hand, he's the most powerful individual, as Rambam says in Mishnah Torah. The king must be treated with great honor. We must implant awe and fear of him in the hearts of all men. As the verse states, appoint a king, which implies the obligation to be in awe of him. We may not ride on his horse nor sit on his throne, use his scepter, wear his crown, or use any of his utensils. When he dies, they should be all burned before his bier. Similarly, only another king is allowed to make use of his servants, maids, and attendants. Anyone who rebels against the king of Israel may be executed by the king. Even if the king orders one of the people to go to a particular place and the latter refuses, or he orders him not to leave his house and he goes out, the offender is liable to be put to death. The king may execute him if he desires, as the verse states, whoever rebels against your command shall be put to death. Similarly, anyone who embarrasses or shames a king may be executed by the king. Ooh, that's pretty absolute authority, right? Pretty terrifying. Yet, the Rambam continues, and he says another point about the king that seems somewhat paradoxical. Just as the Torah grants the king great honor and obligates everyone to revere him, the Rambam continues, so too the Torah commands the king to be lowly and empty at heart, as the verse states, my heart is void within me, King David said, who was a king. Nor should he treat the people with overbearing haughtiness, for the verse describes how the king should not lift up his heart above his brothers. As the verse says, the king should be gracious and merciful to the small and the great, involving himself in their good and welfare. He should protect the honor of even the humblest of men. When he speaks to the people as a community, he should speak gently, as the verse states, listen, my brothers and my people. Similarly, the verse states, if today you will be a servant to these people, the king should always conduct himself with great humility. So how did these two things come together exactly? He is simultaneously all-powerful and yet all humble. All powerful and all humble. And we have another question. Fear and inspiration. How do those two come together? And how does this humility and all powerfulness come together? So in one word, how would you answer that? One word. How is the king all powerful and all humble? One word. Anybody? Huh?
All powerful, how do people relate to him? Right?
Not just how he relates, but he could say,
So that's from the people's point of view. He is all powerful.
but he is all powerful because he could execute that person.
That's from.
No, that's his power. That's his power. And yet all humble at the same time. One word. Too many. Give me one word. Father? How's that?
Addition.
Huh?
Hashem. Fear inspires and is feeling. And he's eyes.
Yeah. But how does that paradox live?
Kavana?
Anybody online?
Tzimtzum.
Yeah, you're very unclear who just spoke.
Tzimtzum.
What?
Tzimtzum.
I'm sorry, your microphone is not working well.
Simpson.
Samson?
Simpson, she said.
One word, I'll tell you what it is. Shaliach. Emissary. Ambassador. An emissary of God. If you look in text number 5 that we had previously from the Rambam, look what he said at the end. For the king is an agent to deliver God's words. He's an agent. He doesn't see anything in himself. His power is not coming from him. It's not because he is tall, handsome, and knows how to be mean. Agent, shliach, a shliach of God, an emissary of God, an agent of God, not a person for himself, which that is humility. Because he's nothing for himself, therefore everything he is only of God. Oh, well, God is all powerful. Guess what? So is he. And so is he. Let's look at the Tzemach Tzedek and explaining this mitzvah of a king. In his own personal life, the king was supposed to be entirely surrendered to God. In other words, the level of surrender was supposed to be so deeply seared into his heart that it would be physically impossible to feel arrogant or to harbor any sense of ego. Rather, the king was supposed to be before God like an inanimate stone, lacking any movement. That's how he felt. The purpose of appointing a Jewish king is that through him, the Jews can surrender to God. Every Jew must surrender to God and follow his command. Now, inasmuch as the king totally surrenders to God and the Jews surrender to him, it emerges that through him, the Jews surrender themselves to God. This then is the king's job, to connect and to submit the Jewish people to God by way of his own surrender. This is interesting. When we think about the word surrender, or we say the word humility, we think about a hunchback person, right, who is like meek and meager. So that's until you learn Hasidic teachings. So it used to be, they tell the story of the Chassid, there was the Chassid in the mikveh. He'd see that, on Erev Shabbos, not only Hasidim go to the mikveh, even non-Hasidim go to the mikveh. And there was this big Torah scholar who was not of a Hasidic bent. And, he's a big Torah scholar. And if you're a big Torah scholar, hey, you're a big guy. You're a big guy. You're an important person. And you know it. You know it. I mean, if you're a good teacher, you know you're a good teacher. You know it. At the same time, Torah says you got to be humble. He's got an issue over here. I'm a big scholar, and I got to be how am I going to do that exactly? How am I going to do that? So in the mikveh Fridays, he would go around with a scrub. He says, "Can I scrub your back? Can I scrub your back? Can I scrub your back?" Why? Because Torah says I got to be humble. I'm a big scholar. Doesn't work, right? So I gotta bring myself down, right? Correct? So a chassid once Fridays going around, also with a bra. Can I scrub your back? Can I scrub your back? This Torah scholar looks and says, "What's going on? What are you doing?" Me scrubbing some humble. No. Says, "Who do you think you are to be so humble? You're not a Torah scholar." It's only me with the ego that has, What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? His Torah scholarship was his Torah scholarship. He was not an agent of God. He wasn't an agent of God. He was his own man. He was his own man. My own man. I'm a big man. I'm a scholar. Now I got a problem. God says I got to be humble, but hey, how's that going to happen? Okay, so I'll make as if. The whole thing is ludicrous, and that's what the chassid was showing him. Not that he got the message, probably, but that it's not correct. That is a contradiction in terms. his ego and his act as humility is an act of humility because inside he feels egotistical because he's a great scholar. But not a king of Israel, not a true scholar. Doesn't feel that. All they feel is the agency of God. They don't feel their sense of specialness, their achievement, their greatness. That's not what they feel, right? So where this guy, to be humble, he has to go walk hunchback, and he's got to play a role as if he's humble, because that's what we think humble people have to do, is be meek and meager, so he's got to do that. But no, this is the opposite. If you're an agent of God, do you need to be meek and meager? No, you're going to be powerful, all powerful as the king. But not because it's coming from your ego, not because it's coming of your accomplishment and your greatness. Not at all. With this now we can understand that he's actually elevated on a bima, the king. As the Talmud tells us, how is the portion of the Torah read by the king? The conclusion of the first day of the festival of the Sukkot on the 8th year, right? After the conclusion of the sabbatical year, they would make a wooden platform for the king in the temple courtyard, and he sits on it. So, why is he sitting on this? Because the king is being elevated. Simple level is just the people should be able to hear him better. But no, he's above the people, greater than the people. Not because he's greater. His position was given to him by God, right? He's just an agent of God. He doesn't feel his greatness. He feels his sense of duty. That's great. The throne that he sits on is great, but that's God's throne, that God put him on the throne, but not because he made himself great. Is that clear? So that's the king. What's it got to do with you and me? Everything. That is the mindset that we need to have, like the king does. That is an agent of God, and therefore he is nothing of himself, but all powerful in the position that he has. Is that clear? Nothing for himself. So the humility is not a false humility, because he recognizes everything I am is only a reflection of God, is a gift from God, a reflection of God. And that's all I am, is a reflection of that, as an agent of God. That itself is humility. But that makes me now, oh, I'm a reflection of God. Well, God's all powerful. That means I'm all powerful. Well, guess what, folks? So are we. And Jewish law actually dictates this is the way we need to wake up in the morning. Wake up in the morning and say, oh God, we say Maidani. How do you say Maidani? And how do you now engage in your day? Meek and meager? Oh God, thank you so much. I'm nothing. I'm dust but ashes. Is that how we start our day? No. You know how you start it? Like a lion, roaring. That's how we start our day. That's what the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, says. When a person should wake in the morning strong as a lion to serve their Creator. Not because you are a lion and because you're going to devour the next guy in business during that day. Because my ego is stronger than his and I can overcome him. No. I'm a lion because I'm in my duty to serve. In my service. Just the king is all powerful. So are we. We're the lion. We're the king of the jungle.
The power and song.
So that's how we serve God with that vigor, like a lion. All right? As the lion is what? The Lion King. That was stolen from the Talmud. The Lion King. Yeah, the lion is the king of all animals. He stole everything from us. And they don't even, they're not even honest about it. Like, at least, give the, in the footnotes, say where you took it from. So what does it mean? What is this a pride? It's a pride, but it's not a pride in what I did. It's a pride in who I am, a servant of God. So the king is the ultimate in that inspires the rest of us that we are also that. Do we get carried away with ourselves that, oh, I'm bigger and better than you? No, because you also have to wake up like a lion in the morning, because you are also serving the Creator, and the chair that you hold is the chair that is unbelievably valuable and important, because God put you on that chair and elevated you on the dais in order to serve. That only because we're here as a shliach of Hashem, in the service of God, as an agent of God. What a different way to look at things. How powerful is that? Imagine every child in school was learning this notion. What would happen? All the inner demons that children are dealing with today, and adults, by the way. But, with this we understand why the children also have to come, right? Because they have their inner demons. They have the things they need to deal with and to vanquish. Wait, you wouldn't have these inner demons if you're strong like a lion, because in the service of God, you have that strength, and therefore you're going to overcome your inner demons. You're going to overcome your self-doubts, because I'm an agent of God to serve. And the seat that I hold, the position that I have, is all powerful. Not because I'm better than you, but what I have is all powerful. Therefore, I can overcome whatever I need to overcome. Therefore, I'm whole, I'm complete, I'm worthy. Not because I did something, because I am something. And therefore, when I am that something, I'm able to overcome the inner demons. And this is what the sages say in the Talmud. Rav Levi Bar Chama said in the name Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, one should always incite his good inclination over his evil inclination, as the verse says, tremble and do not sin. What do you mean incite? Start a civil war? What are you doing over here? How does it make sense? Well, the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya. Or look at the Torah here. The Talmud states one should always incite his good inclination against evil inclination. This includes behaving in a condescending, dismissive manner to our inner temptations. In other words, know that you have the power. You're the lion. You're the king, and you have the capability of dismissing your inner challenges, your inner the temptations that are driving you. The inner demons, the self-doubt. You have the capability to completely dismiss them. Why? Because I'm a shliach of God. I'm God's ambassador. Therefore, the seat that I hold gives me the authority of God that I can overcome these things. This is far from being meek and meager. This is being a very powerful individual. And as the Rebbe explains in the Sikha, accepting God's authority and fearing him must be in a manner that evokes a platform. Like the king was on the platform, above the all. If it's exclusively fear and submission, it can create feelings of deficiency and low self-worth. This would be counterproductive to anyone's religious duties. And so we evoke a platform to incorporate feelings of assertiveness, as the law states, awake in the morning, strong like as a lion. This also empowers us to overpower our negative temptations. In other words, if it's merely fear and submission, but it brings you to feeling less than, meek and meager, it's coming from the wrong place. Like our great Torah scholar, right? It's coming from the wrong place. If it's evoking this fear, this sense of presence of God, and therefore submission, that brings me to feeling all powerful, strong like a lion. I've created the platform like the king sits on the platform, and I'm like that, meaning it's empowering me, then we know it's coming from a good place. Why am I being empowered? Because as a reflection of the divine, as an emissary of Hashem, I'm all powerful. And I come out of the gate like a lion. I deal with my day in such a manner. So what do we have over here? Accepting God's authority and the fear of God is not meant to minimize us. It's meant to maximize us. It's meant to really bring out not anything debilitating, but on the contrary, something all-powerful in each and every single one of us. But the key is recognizing that we're an ambassador of Hashem, we're a shliach of Hashem, emissary. And therefore, I'm going in His power, in His name, and then there's nothing that can stop us. No inner demon is going to bring me down. No challenge is going to put me down. So the truth is, all we need is not love. All we need is the fear of heaven. Because if you have the fear of heaven, which means always being cognizant of what heaven needs from you, right from wrong. What's right from wrong? And that's all that we bear in mind, then what happens? There's not another thing in life I need to fear. Because I know God is present, God is in control, He's in master control, and all I need to do is do the right thing. And this is the famous story of the Baal Shem Tov. As a child, when I was 5 years old, I was orphaned from both my father and mother. The last words spoken to me by my Holy Father before his passing were, by the way, right now is, it's Chayelo, so in his honor, birthday of the Baal Shem Tov. He is today only how many years? He's only 200 and 200 and oh my gosh. Oh, he's 300. My tongue, 200. He's 325 years old today. 325 years old. Baal Shem Tov. Okay. So, the last words spoken to me by my Holy Father before his passing were, Yisrolik, fear nothing but God alone. Consonant, With my father's words, I was drawn to walk in the fields and the great deep forest near our village. From Cheder, I would make my way to the fields where I would review by heart what I had learned in Cheder. Often I would sleep over the night in the field or in the forest. My guardians, who looked after me, and several other orphan boys and girls, did not tolerate this behavior of mine to wander in the fields and the forest, and dealt severely with me. So past 2 years, one morning I heard the forest, the sound of a human voice. I followed the direction of the voice and came upon a figure of a Jew enveloped in a tallis and tefillin, praying with a fervor such as I had never before witnessed. I hid myself behind the trees and derived great pleasure listening to the man's praying. I was enthralled by the extraordinary sight and thought to myself that this holy man must be one of the 36 hidden tzaddikim, righteous and saintly people that are in the world. The tzaddik concluded his prayers, removed his tallis and tefillin, and began to read the book of Psalms in a melodious voice. Following his recital of Psalms, the man spent some time in ecstatic Torah study. He then gathered his books and his tallis and tefillin and placed them in a sack, lifted his sack onto his shoulders, and set off on his way. At this point, I stepped out of my hiding place and walked towards him. When the man saw me, he asked me, "What is a small child doing all alone in the forest? Are you not afraid to be in the forest all by yourself?" I answered him, "I like the field and the forest because there are no people, and the great majority of whom are arrogant and dishonest. I am not afraid of anything. I am an orphan without a father or mother. My father peace be upon him, said to me before his passing, Yisrael, look, fear nothing but God alone. So I'm not afraid of anything." Now, can you use the Baal Shem Tov, But yes. So think about it this way, folks. If all we do is fear God, what does it mean, fear God? Fear to do right from wrong, to do the moral right thing, have a sense of God's presence in the choice that we are making, so we do the right choice, right? Then we have the confidence and the assuredness and the peace of mind that whatever happens is in God's hands. And therefore there is nothing else to fear. The less we fear in God, the more we have an anxiety of what the outcome will be. And when we don't fear him at all, then all we do is build ourselves up because we are frightened inside. So I need to build me up to become bigger more and more, fill myself up with more and more, because I feel empty and I'm fearful. What am I fearful? I've got no value. How am I going to be perceived? What's of me? There's nothing. So then I've got to do. And what does that do? All it does is feed your ego. Become more and more. And the less you have fear of God, the more only you have a fear is of being validated, of being accomplished, of being a something. But if you have a fear of God, meaning I am whole and I am complete and I'm worthy, not because I did something, because I am something. I recognize that I am an agent of Hashem. And my agency is only to do one thing, is to recognize God in my life, his presence, and the choice is for me to choose right from wrong. And that's the only thing I have to fear, is doing the right thing. Then there's nothing else to fear. The more that becomes real to us, consequence doesn't matter anymore, because that's not in my control in any case. So this is what it means, accepting authority, having fear of God. That is extremely inspirational. So all you need is fear in the end, in service of God. So we're going back to the Alter Rebbe, chapter 41 of Tanya. He said the beginning, the root, the beginning and the roots, the beginning and the foundation, the root of all divine service is the fear of God. What's the fear of God? The presence of God, of choosing right from wrong, of the moral choice that we have. And that's the beginning of everything. And when we have that notion, when we live with that notion, then there's nothing else what to fear, nothing else what to worry about, and everything will be wonderful. Chaim. Any questions? Folks, any questions? Everybody has a clarity, it sounds like. Seems like.
Rendered speechless. It was beautiful and amazing.
Thank you, Oba.
We can hold the same class in 7 years again.
Thank you. All right. Beautiful. Any questions here? Any comments? Any thoughts?
Just that last time I saw you in the office, words you're saying, extreme comfort. The things I've seen to be factor.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. Rabbi.
Thank you.
Have a great week.
PRC at 8:00. Thank you.